Well, I'm joined by Kishore Subramanian, who is the founder of Shree Consultants. Thank you so much, sir, for speaking to Mirror Now. Appreciate it. The comments by RBI governor come at a time when there have been several complaints of harassment and even suicide in some cases due to harsh recovery methods by agents. I'd like to know from you, what are the broad parameters and framework according to which lenders can recover money? Or let me put it this way, what are the do's and don'ts? Where do you draw that line?
Okay, first of all, thank you. Most importantly, I would like to say that there are rights and privacy of a borrower. Okay, so today it's been a welcome move by Shaktikanta Das, where he has actually said that entities which are lending to people cannot use certain things. So if you ask me, the key do's and don'ts, primarily you have to understand that there is a history of this collection issue happening in India. India being fairly a nascent economy and where the credit offtake has really hastened and gone up from 2004. This issue first started in the year 2008 when there was a first complaint against a private bank where a person allegedly tried committing suicide. So the do's and don'ts are as follows. First of all, there has to be an authorized agency appointed by the institution, whether it is an NBFC bank or any online creditor. Point number one. The person collecting, the recovery agent, has to have his credibility and identification credentials shown in person if he is visiting. As far as the visiting hours are concerned, for the borrower, they can call only between 7 a.m. in the morning and 7 p.m. in the evening. Before 7 a.m., after 7 p.m., they are not allowed to call. As far as the language is concerned, they cannot be abusive, they cannot harass, they cannot threaten, they cannot use any indecent foul language. And more importantly, if there is bereavement in the family, the rule clearly, categorically, as far as the BFSI is concerned, states that one cannot disturb the client for a few days. And when it was challenged in the High Court of Patna, it was said that it cannot be disturbed for 45 days, any bereaved family. There are multiple such rules which have the codes and conducts of behavior, but prima facie, what needs to be understood from a client's point of view is that one has the right to privacy. You cannot be going around disturbing the neighbors, the relatives, the friends. But coming to the true point of what's happening in the ground reality, that's way different. And that's the reason today Shaktikanta Das has come hard on entities, and specifically after the case of a suicide and many such attempts.
That's right, Mr. Subramanian. It's a very enlightening point, you've made there, because you've enumerated in detail as to what are the do's and the don'ts and where do you draw that line. I'd also like to ask you, Mr. Das said that most of such instances are reported from unregulated entities, true. But you also added that the central bank has also come across such tactics being used by entities regulated by the RBI. Why do you think regulated entities are indulging into such practices despite reputational risks?
Okay, so here I would like to mention at a very personal level that last year, in the month of June, I lost my own brother to COVID. And now I've been subject to harassment here. My sister-in-law is a widow, a COVID bereaved widow, and there are credit cards which were unpaid because of the unavoidable and the sudden death of a 48-year-old man, left as a lady alone with a child who is 21. We had a classic case of harassment where multiple people used to keep calling. Okay, answering your question first, why are regulated entities doing this despite the fact that there is a risk to the reputation? There are bottom lines which most of the organizations, be it Bank A, Bank B, I wouldn't like to mention names, but there are bottom lines they would like to have. All these recovery agents and the organizations, if they are outsourced, they have a monthly target to attain. And if you have a monthly target to achieve, then it becomes predominant that you collect. And what happens is that they pounce and prowl on the most gullible group, which means if a person is very gullible, soft, and he takes the pressure, then they pounce on him. And what happens is that they arrive at odd hours, they pressurize, they call up relatives, they call up friends, they call up guarantors. That's at least a part of the law, but the rest is all not allowed. And they come and sit inside houses with very harsh, abusive tones. In my own case, where I had lost my brother, despite multiple times giving the death certificate, we had the same institutions calling again and again, asking from the first event where it is an emotionally torturous thing where a widow has to repeatedly say, I've lost my husband, he's dead, and stuff like that. So the point is that unregulated or regulated, the ground reality is far different from what the central bank is thinking. And I think Mr. Shaktikanta Das has hit the right note on this. It's high time all these entities are told, and most importantly, that technology doesn't support. And I'll tell you how the technology doesn't support. You enter a data in the bank, you enter a data in an institution, the next guy who is calling doesn't know it. So there is no update. So the customer is again and again called back, and there is harassment. Why do they do it? Primary, to achieve their targets, and bottom line is more important. And these third-party agents are specifically told, hook or crook, somehow get the money back.
That's right. So there are no checks and balances, because ultimately they are given a deadline by hook or crook. They have to get that money back. Also, Mr. Subramanian, with an ever-evolving digital financial landscape, do you think RBI's guidelines on this issue that the governor spoke about will actually have a material impact in helping such incidents come down in the future?
It can have, provided there has to be an efficient judiciary process. For example, if today I had to go to the courts and tell that my brother is dead, and in no way is my sister-in-law liable for a personal loan, which is an unsecured loan given to an individual and who no longer is alive, I think it takes years for the courts to give a dictat. And that's where the problem, with due respects to the judicial forum, I would like to say that an efficient judiciary system is where this nexus will stop, and the government and the banks and the institution will be dealt with a hard hand. But yes, it's a good beginning that the RBI has come heavily, at least the governor has taken serious note. But I would be sorry to say that in 2008, this had come hard. There was a classic case of an agent representing from X bank where, he was forcing himself inside somebody's house and not leaving. But despite all this, in the ground reality, it seems to continue. It will only stop when the judicial interference and the courts come hard on some of the entities. I believe that is there, but it's a good first step.
Right. So it's not just the guidelines, but it's the judiciary and even the agencies that have to come down heavily on such entities. One last question, Mr. Subramanian. Now that the RBI has taken note of the harassment, I'd like to ask you very simply, if a borrower is being harassed as per RBI's unacceptable standards, what should a person do to file their grievance in the current scenario?
Okay, primarily, let's first understand that in any institution which is regulated or unregulated, today we are in a digital world, there is a nodal grievance officer. That's where you first raise the complaint. That's called step one. Step two, after you raise it with the nodal grievance officer, you move to the next step, which is the management of the organization, which is a grievance committee. Once you do that, and if you get favorable response and it stops, it's fine. If it doesn't, third, you serve them a legal notice. Now, coming to a country like India, where you don't have the wherewithal in terms of the money, time, and the effort and the knowledge to actually serve a notice, what you can actually do is there are pro bono lawyers available to serve you notices on these grounds, and they can help you doing this. Failing which, a simple email stating that I would be forced to take legal action is good enough. Now, if this doesn't work and a notice is served, it still doesn't work, the best and the simplest way is to go to the bank branch, explain the situation, give a written letter stating the facts of the matter in the vernacular language or English, get a signed copy back from them stating that you have received the letter, and then if it still doesn't work, you need to go to the courts. Or one step prior to that, you can go to the ombudsman and seek grievance. But you need to have a fair case. You just can't say, I don't have money, I can't pay, so you cannot be harassed. That's not the working condition. But yes, within the purview of law, they have got all the rights and the legality to ask, but in the prescribed manner with due respect to dignity, privacy, and not using any threatening or undue methods.
All right, Mr. Kishore Subramanian, thank you very much for that effective and extensive explanation.